Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I am your host, Ed Dentzel, and you made it. It was Friday. It's Friday night. I hope the week went well for you. I'm happy to get to the end of the week. Not that my weekdays are much different than my weekends with what I do in my life, but I'm sure for your life, the weekends are vastly different from what you do during the week if you have a regular work schedule out there. I think I've told you when I lived in Las Vegas, there was only a partial amount of time that I lived there for 13 and a half years where I had kind of a normal schedule in that I worked Monday through Friday. That was very unusual for me. For most of those years, I worked like Tuesday through Sundays or Wednesdays, Wednesdays through Mondays and things like that. I remember early on I had a Thursday through Monday's work schedule because I worked in entertainment. So maybe I shouldn't take it for granted that everybody has come to their week. If you're listening in one of those types of places like Las Vegas where the city never sleeps and those industries in that city never sleep, then maybe Friday is just another day to you. So maybe I shouldn't take that for granted. But don't know what I'm going to do this weekend. Trying to get started in some new writing projects and continuing to send my book, The Comebacks. I tell you about that every show. How you can download the first chapter for free at edwarddentzel.com. Sending out to literary agents, trying to get an agent. That is something that is not easy to do if I could only tell you all of the stories. But let's get right to the show. I got a lot to talk about. I have stuff that I haven't been able to get to the last few days that I want to get off my plate. I want to go into this Saturday and Sunday with a clean slate so I can start on Monday not having to look back to Thursday, Friday to still talk about old stories that I think need to be covered. There's something first I want to start on from yesterday in talking about the story about Ann Coulter and how she compared Ted Cruz to Tracy Flick, the character played by Reese Witherspoon in the movie Election, which I told you yesterday. Great movie, great comedy, great insight into human nature, I think, in that movie. You know the funny part about this, and this is a story that's popped up within the last couple days, and I should have included it yesterday, that here Ted Cruz is being criticized by Ann Coulter, who is one of the more famous conservative media people in the United States for the last 20 years. I think it's very easy to say that. And dare I say that she has earned all of the attention that she has gotten. Whatever her net worth is and however books that many she's sold over the years, that hasn't been by some under shady circumstances. She's earned it. My criticism for her is that within the last 4 years, she has completely gone off the rails, kind of starting with supporting Mitt Romney as much as she did and Chris Christie as much as she did. And then it's gotten worse. But looking at where she started, and I made the point yesterday that if she were to be told 20 years ago there'd be a senator from Texas who was conservative and did this and did that was going to run for president in 2016. 20 years ago, she would have been ecstatic. She would have said, great, conservatism still exists 20 years from now, and he has a possibility of winning the nomination. I'm sure 20 years ago, she couldn't have been more excited. Now, she's fighting against that guy. But this even gets more bizarre when you have the story out there that Ted Cruz is still insisting that Mitch McConnell lied to him. All right. And what is Ann Coulter's position on this? We know how much Ann Coulter despises Mitch McConnell. But the problem that she has is that you'll get Donald Trump to speak more favorably of Mitch McConnell than Ted Cruz will. However, Ann Coulter supports Donald Trump. That's what I mean. This is all so difficult to find out. This is one more way that these conservative media people, these famous people who have gotten rich off of conservatism, of selling it, over the last 20 years have twisted themselves into pretzels supporting Donald Trump. And they've done it on their own. They haven't been forced to do it. This isn't like the book 1984 where they had a cage with rats put over their head and were threatened to support Donald Trump or else. You know what I mean? So, one more way that this is also confusing to me. And unfortunately, she has, because of her stature, has drug, I think, other just regular conservatives, just regular voting conservatives, down that path with her to where they're at the point where they see an argument between Ted Cruz and Mitch McConnell, and they may be thinking, I hope Mitch McConnell wins that argument. Now, you know, I don't complain about Mitch McConnell, and I didn't complain that much about John Boehner. I don't complain that much about Paul Ryan. I think they all have a thankless job. Completely thankless. Somebody has to do it. And dare I say it, 99.5% of conservatives in the United States couldn't do the job that they're doing. That job, Speaker of the House, Majority Leader in the Senate, is a lot harder than it looks, especially when you start considering a lot of the representatives and a lot of the senators are not as conservative as we like. That's life. However, as you would suspect, in an argument between Ted Cruz and Mitch McConnell, I'm going to take Ted Cruz's side most of the time. Not all the time, because nobody's perfect all the time. Nobody's right all the time. But most of the time, I'm going to be on Ted Cruz's side. In this particular circumstance, I think that Ted Cruz is telling the truth regarding Mitch McConnell. And that he's still doubling down on it just should show all of you, or especially all of you Trump supporters who try to make Ted Cruz out as being part of the quote-unquote establishment, that it's a really weird situation where he's part of the quote-unquote, once again, establishment, and he's calling Mitch McConnell a liar. I just want to know, is Donald Trump part of the establishment too because he's calling Ted Cruz a liar? I just want to know. But there Ann Coulter is waking up every day. She sees the same stories that I do. She does. I have no special knowledge when I do this show. I take the material for the show from the same internet that everybody else can get on. And I wonder what goes through her head when she sees the story about Ted Cruz having this dispute with Mitch McConnell. I think the only thing that you can believe is that she would take Mitch McConnell's side. Because you cannot get her, despite she and Ted Cruz having probably 80% in common, maybe even more than that, for her to say a nice word about him. Can't get one nice word out of her. It's all bizarre. And she's not the only one. There's also, of course, the stories out there about, which has been covered very well at redstate.com, the other red state, I have to say that every time, about all the times that Donald Trump has been on with Sean Hannity, and then Sean Hannity's people come out and say, well, you know what, we've interviewed Ted Cruz and the rest of the candidates just as much, and that's not the point. The point is you could, if you could do this on YouTube, you put an interview done by Sean Hannity with Donald Trump next to an interview by Sean Hannity done with Ted Cruz. They have vastly different tones to them. Vastly different. And that's the point. And it's funny that Sean Hannity's people, in defending him against redstate.com, the other red state, and others, just kind of let that just go right by. They just want to talk about the time involved, the appearances, and not the content of those interviews. It's like they don't want to talk about it. Well, I wonder why. When Ted Cruz is on with them, Sean Hannity plays like a Donald Trump, like he's on Donald Trump's payroll. When Donald Trump is on there, Sean Hannity treats Donald Trump like Chris Matthews treats Barack Obama. Does he not see it? Are these people, there's this, I know this saying comes up once in a while, and I'm not saying that this movie is the writers of this movie came up with it, but it's stuck with me for quite a while, is arrogance and self-awareness seldom go hand in hand. You have self-awareness, you're usually not arrogant, and if you're arrogant, you're usually not self-aware. Ann Coulter, Sean Hannity, the rest of these people, they don't seem to be very self-aware, so I can only conclude that they're arrogant. Right? It's the only conclusion you can come to. But I wanted to follow that up from yesterday because, as I pointed out yesterday, she's going on and on about Ted Cruz being Tracy Flick, and she and Ted Cruz have more in common that, at least the way she's marketed herself the last 20 years, have more in common than she does with Donald Trump. That's the crazy part about all of this. Not just her, Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham, Rush Limbaugh, all of them. They all have more in common with Ted Cruz and Donald Trump, but they'll come to Donald Trump's defense 100 times before they'll come to Ted Cruz's once. Maybe that's a little exaggeration, but it's close. Let's move on to new material. Did you see this video of the flyover? I'm going to have to look here in my notes for a second to see the name of this ship. The USS Donald Cook. I don't know who Donald Cook was. But it's a destroyer. It was out somewhere. And these two Russian jets flew by very low. Have you seen this? Happened a couple days ago. And this is from, I think, the actual U.S. Navy site. Navy.mil. Is that the Naval Department site? I don't think I've been there before. I don't remember. I don't think I've ever used it for my show before. But I have to say that the first time I saw this video, I was like, man, that would be wild to be on that ship and having those two jets. I think they were Su-23s, high-tech jet that the Russians have, and just flying by. I don't know how fast. You can't even tell how fast they're going. Didn't sound like there was a sonic boom, so it was under 600 miles an hour, but still pretty fast. And then you go to the conservative sites that I go to, and on one hand, it's like you have two camps. You have the camp that, well, if Ronald Reagan was still president, they wouldn't be doing that. And then on the other hand, there's also that camp of they don't think it's any big deal about what happened. I'm not going to say that it's not any big deal, but I just want to inject maybe a few things that need to be pointed out here. How bad really is this? And I know there are also those devil's advocates who say, well, you know what? The American Navy, they do this too. That may be. I just have tried to look for videos of American jets buzzing Russian ships, and I can't find any. I know that there's been some conflicts in the South China Sea. China setting a base up there, us flying through their airspace. But I haven't seen any buzzing of any ships, any threatening. I mean, when we flew through that area, what was it at, like 35,000 feet or something? And it wasn't even an attack plane. It was like a radar plane or something like that. Doesn't have any bullets on it, doesn't have any missiles on it, doesn't have any bombs on it. So that's hardly comparable, I'd say. And we still, of course, insist, as do other countries in the region, that China set those bases up illegally against agreements that they have in that area of the world. So some people may claim that the United States does this. I just don't have any video evidence of it. I know maybe they say that we do it. these sailors, Russian sailors, Chinese sailors, whoever else, they don't have cameras on their ships to film jets buzzing by at 50 feet off the water? No. You also have to remember something else about this, and this is kind of easy to forget given everything that has gone on recently, is that Russia is not an enemy of ours, not an ally, not in NATO. It's gone into the Ukraine. We kind of let them do it. It's been fairly provocative the last 5 years, I guess you'd go to say. But they are not enemies. Surely not the Soviet Union. You know, it's funny how it seems like so many conservatives can, fall back on that. And I think that's what they mean when they say, well, what would Ronald Reagan do if those Russian jets had flown close? Well, had that happened in, let's say, 1982, that would be a lot different situation than what we have now 34 years later. That's like getting mad at, maybe in 1963 if a couple Japanese fighters flew close to a United States destroyer in 1963, let's say. Yes, 20 years ago, the Japanese were the enemy. 1963, not so much. There's also another part of this. Who knows? I mean, we as Americans, we look at the military, just when you say the word military, in a certain way because of the culture we have in the United States regarding our military. Okay. We have a deeper respect for our military than any other country in the world. I don't think that there's any doubt about that. Even though I know that other countries have impressive armies and navies, Air Force, but when it comes to your average soldier walking down the street in his uniform, in her uniform, women too, it's something different. Of course, a lot of that has to do with what's gone on since September 11th. But we also think of our military as being very disciplined, which is somewhat true. We know that soldiers get in trouble and those things happen just because people are people. But we have to think that kind of top-down discipline from the top down, I don't know is so evident in other militaries. And see, when I see something like that going on, those two jets flying by, you know what? I'm thinking, there's a couple 25-year-old Russians, guys, they don't hate the United States, and that's something we always have to remember. It may be that there are certain elements within the Chinese government that don't like the United States. There may be certain elements within the Russian government that don't like the United States, for examples. But we know a vast amount of the Chinese people, they love the United States. Vast amount of the Russian people, they love the United States. Have to remember that. So it could be, we're just looking at it, from our side, that those two guys and those two jets flying by that Navy, that's like their biggest thrill in the world to be able to fly their jets as close to an American destroyer. Not thinking about what else could be caused by this. And in fact, there have been, comments said like, well, that was unprofessional, unsafe. And that is true. But you have to there has to be a prerequisite that professionalism is part of their military in the first place. And I'm not so sure that it is. We look at it as a provocation. These guys may be thinking, here we are, Russian citizens. This may be as close as we ever get to something in the United States. We're going to take a look and we're going to put on a show for them. It could be something as simple as that. It could be. Once again, I know it's unsafe. I know if something goes wrong and they cut it too close, then there's going to be an accident. I know that sucks. But start talking about they're doing it because the United States is weak or because they want to provoke us into shooting them or something like that. I just don't believe it. All right? It's not like Vladimir Putin knew where that destroyer was and called his Air Force commander up and said, hey, I want you to buzz that destroyer out there today. But somehow I think when I start reading all these comments, I get the idea that people think that's the way the world works. Let's just put this on the record. The discipline of a Russian pilot, the professionalism that is injected into them is much different from what goes on in the United States military. Okay. The only way that you would ever see something like that done is by orders that come from high in a military command structure to command two pilots in F-18s or whatever else other jets we may have to go buzz some Chinese, Russian, North Korean, who other Iranian destroyer. Okay, is there any other countries that might have navies that we might think about doing that to? Mm-hmm. That's my attitude. You should know, for the record, though, I've never been in the military. Taken interest in it, read a lot about it, watched a lot of videos, have friends who are in the military. Mm-hmm. But to automatically go to DEFCON, what it would be 5. It's the one is the calmest, 5 is the worst, right? It's not the opposite. It's just weird to me. What I see are a couple undisciplined, unprofessional pilots with jets that are dangerous, doing something that, although it looks from our standpoint provocative, from their point of view, they're just messing around. I feel the same way about these, hear about once in a while that a Russian bomber is strayed into European Union space, into British space, into Swedish space, and they have to send up, fighters to escort them out, as if they're probing the defenses. Russia knows what our defenses are. It knows what the Europeans' defenses are. They know if they go up, they know what's going to happen. This isn't some sort of test. They know. This isn't like 1952 where there are no satellites in space and you have to rely on everything from, spies on the ground. They have spy satellites. They have electronic means and everything. There's not as many secrets regarding that stuff as it was 50, 60 years ago. And so when I think about this stuff, I don't automatically think, well, they think we're weak, so they think that they can just buzz us and make fun of us and make us look stupid and anything like that. You also have to appreciate the consequences of shooting something, because I'm going to guess that a destroyer like that has the means to shoot one of those jets down. I know in a fight like that the ship is at a great disadvantage. But it has radar. It knows the jets are coming. It knows those jets are coming well off in advance. Do we really need to shoot one of them down? You know what else I think of? I was going to mention before. Going back to, remember this would have been the biggest story of 2001 had it not been for September 11th. And that was when we had that reconnaissance plane there were multiple amount of men and women from the Air Force on it. and that Chinese jet got too close and they ran into each other and the Chinese pilot died and the American pilot had to land the plane. Was it on mainland China or one of China's islands or something like that? Remember, that would have been the biggest military story of 2001 had it not been for September 11th. That happened, I'm guessing, it was after George W. Bush was in office. Was it February, March, something like that? April? Same kind of thing. It wasn't like the Chinese military sent that jet up there to harass that American plane. That guy did it on his own. And if you go back to that time, it was very much common that Chinese pilots would go up there and they'd fly rings around. They weren't trying to intimidate. They were just showing off. Bunch of young guys with machines that they are probably, although they are taught to use them physically, mentally, I don't know if they're mature enough to be handling them. Which is, once again, a problem we don't necessarily have in the United States in our military. Just different situation. Now, if bullets start flying, if they start shooting missiles that land, 100 yards off the bow of one of these ships, then of course my opinion would change. But if they're just going to fly by, and hey, and you know what? Russians and the Chinese, they know about YouTube also. I'm sure those pilots got back to base, knew it was going to be filmed, and I'm sure they visited all the sites where where those videos now sit, and they just have the biggest laugh in the world. Okay? The biggest laugh in the world. So, and I don't, there's not going to be any discipline from, it's just different. It's not like they got back to base. Their commanding officer finds out about these videos, and these two get disciplined. Maybe. But I happen to think that the way those militaries are set up, especially in Russia, maybe not so much in China, but in Russia, they just have a lot more flexibility, I think. I think it's a lot more undisciplined for a variety of reasons. And who knows, given it's Russia, those two pilots could have been drunk for all we know. And once again, you have to compare. You have to look at all the options and say, is it worth shooting them down that coming that close? Because I know what we as conservatives, we want to think. We think that, I know what we think. We think that because we haven't done anything in regards to ISIS, we haven't done anything as much as we'd like with terrorism in general, with Iran, that then this translates. And I know that we have been weak in those areas, but that's real war stuff. That's real war stuff. And I'm not so sure, and I know that Russia has gone into Syria. We've let them do that. I don't know if that's completely analogous to a couple guys buzzing an American destroyer. I just don't. I know that's what we as conservatives think because we have a certain idea regarding how the world sees us as being weaker. But I'm not totally convinced of it. I just find somewhere in between all of this, between shooting it down and completely blowing it off, because you will see people, taking up the Russian side of it. Well, the Americans do this all over the world too, and I mean, there's that attitude. Like I said, if there's any proof of that, I'd like to see it. So, fascinating story. And it's not something you see every day, but I'm just not as ticked off about it as your average conservative is. And, it's not a blow to my ego, and I don't feel weak because these Russians are doing this. I think if the time came and these guys did something that was truly warfare-like, I'm sure they'd both be shot down in seconds. I think. But I got to go to the break. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.
The voice of American conservatism. WRS Digital, Red State Talk Radio.
And we're back at the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. A couple more things about that story from the first part of the show. What if it had been British jets that did that? Of course, that would be no big deal, right? Because they're seen as an ally. We're their friends. They're our friends. In fact, I'm sure a lot of American pilots know British pilots. And if a couple British jets, what would they be, Harriers or something like that, flew by an American destroyer, it would just be fun. Just be fun. In contrast, let's go to the totally opposite end. North Korea does that, a sworn enemy of the United States. I doubt those jets even get that close. I doubt North Korean jets ever get that close to a U.S. destroyer. Well, the Russians, they're kind of halfway in between both of those. They're not our allies, but they're not sworn enemies either. Despite what Vladimir Putin does and some of these things that we don't like. Halfway in between. So with each different case has to be treated a different way. If it's the Brits, it's just a big laugh. If it's the North Koreans, then you got to start really, really worrying. And that maybe that video never happens. With the Russians, you have to make a judgment call. And I think in this case that the judgment of not shooting them down, just filming it and everything, is the right choice. It's the right choice. So let's move on to something else. Megyn Kelly. You know, just when you think understand all the dynamics that have gone on between her and Donald Trump, something new happens. And you start to wonder if this is all just a big show. I know, I'm going to tell you, I waver back and forth on this. At one point, I'm like, oh yeah, those two really do despise each other. And then on the other hand, then you know what else is going on at Fox News and the ratings that they're getting because Donald Trump. And you think maybe this is just one big game. Donald Trump says he's not going to go on the channel. Then he does. Then he won't. Then he does. And then, of course, we've already talked about in this show about with Sean Hannity, and we know how he's been treated by Bill O'Reilly, and how those guys haven't defended Megyn Kelly against Donald Trump. But then she'll go incognito to go meet Donald Trump. It's all so bizarre, and it's that kind of stuff. You know, for so long, we as conservatives have complained about the media. And I will say that I don't complain about the media even close to as much as I think your average conservative who has a show like this. I know I don't come anywhere near what other people do, other men and women who have shows, or even write about it, whatever they do. But this sure can make, and for so long, so many of us have defended Fox News. And that's kind of, I think, what you're hearing regarding Fox News just in general, not picking out any particular person on there. But what you've been seeing in the past year is that, wow, they've become no different than all of the other channels. And then this, Megyn Kelly going to see Donald Trump, kind of adds to that. Because you have to remember something. In both her case and Donald Trump's case, both of their, what would it be, a Q rating or something, have gone up because of all of this. Yes, Megyn Kelly was somebody who was known, had a popular show, but now she's been able to put herself in the middle of one of probably the biggest politician versus media type arguments, disagreements in modern history. Probably. Something that's gotten way more personal than I think that we have ever seen. Once again, I mean, what would you have to go back to? Maybe the Bill Clinton versus Rush Limbaugh days? Maybe? Maybe something like around the Oklahoma City bombing, something like that. George W. Bush had problems with the media. Of course, they had a huge problem with him, but there was nothing, none of this one-on-one stuff, person versus person. Might have been politician versus channel, particular news conglomerate against a senator or something, but never one-on-one. This is what that has become. That's what I guess makes this so unique. And also in the fact that they have had a chance to run into each other in these debates. Now, I've told you what I think. I think that this goes way back before Donald Trump knew that, maybe he had already, if you believe it, he talked about running for president for a long time, but him sending him pictures of himself, we know those stories, and those stories are true. What's a married guy doing that? Well, we know what Donald Trump thinks about marriage. I think that this still comes back to, at least on his part, of being spurned. Showing he's attracted to Megyn Kelly, likes her, does all this stuff, and she kind of blows him off. Mm-hmm. And that ticks him off because we know that Donald Trump gets whatever he wants. On the other hand, I think that Megyn Kelly, who I'm not going to really defend either, has seen this as a way to raise her stature as well. Because of this, what was she in Vogue magazine, Cosmopolitan magazine, doing that? Does she get that and all of this other attention if Donald Trump never comes along? Or does she get it if she just plays along like Sean Hannity and Bill O'Reilly have for almost a year and Greta Van Susteren have all done? Probably not. It is, and it all feels so much like what we as conservatives have hated about news in this country for so long. That once again also makes me wonder why so many conservatives are so willing to jump on to the Donald Trump bandwagon. For so long we hate this relationship, this liberal relationship. The news should be independent and we should get the facts, and it shouldn't be these men and women, these reporters who are kissing the politicians' butts and everything else. But then a certain guy comes along, he gets a butt kissed by a particular channel, and too many conservatives love it. I don't get it. I don't get it. You know my attitude. I want tough questions asked of all of these candidates, including the guy who I just happen to support, who I like the most. I don't support him. I like the most, Ted Cruz. I want him to be asked tough questions because I want to see if his character can stand it. Whereas liberals, the way they have treated Democrat politicians for so long, of course, they don't do that. Mainly the reason being, they're afraid they're going to make their own politician look stupid if they don't ask the particular right question in the particularly right way. That's the way I see it. But now this goes on. Donald Trump gets all these softball questions, and too many people love it. Too many. It's not supposed to be like this. But then you see this, and you see a woman who is giving him a hard time, and then she's going to meet him behind closed doors. My opinion is no reporter should ever meet any political leader behind closed doors. It should always be on the record. Now, it may be that Roger Ailes told her, Megyn, you got to go talk to him. I know what I would have said. Megyn Kelly, what she has done for herself, whether by manipulation or that's just the way it has gone, could quit Fox News and do anything. Anything. I mean, does she really believe that she's going to be on Fox News for the next 20 years? Eventually, she's going to have to find something else to do anyway. She's attractive. She's smart. She's not going to get any more well-known than she is right now. And if she were to say, no, I'm not going to do that, she could easily go do something else. Have her own show on another station where she wouldn't have to deal, and she could do the same thing. It would just, there would be a lot of options open to her. But she goes and does this. I can only believe that she was forced to do this. If she did this on her own, then that makes it even worse. But that is a symbol of what your average American hates about politics. It really is. Despite everything that she's done in giving Donald Trump a hard time, all it takes is one little thing like that, and it throws the entire thing up in the air as if it begins to feel like it's all scripted. All for ratings. Which is something that I believe anyway, in regards to all of this. I've told you, I think that they cover Donald Trump the way they do because their ratings go up. Talking about him gets people all fired up. They start tuning in, and it's I think of Howard Stern way back in the day in the 80s. If you see his, and this was true. If you've ever seen that movie about his life that came out in the late 1990s, that they found that people who liked Howard Stern listened for an hour. The people who disliked him listened for an hour and a half. That's something psychologically that's hard to quantify. It's hard to get into the mind of somebody who does that, because I know I'm the opposite. But I think that that's what's happening at Fox News and other places right now. That they're drawing a lot of people just because people don't like Donald Trump, not people who actually like him. And that's a whole other dynamic to all this. Once again, it gets so complex when people start sacrificing their values for a buck. But that happened this past week. And she came out and commented on it. I have no reason why we have any reason to believe what she says it actually happened at all. As long as it's behind closed doors, that means that she wants it off the record. And then, wait a minute, she's going to go and not tell anybody. It was just almost by accident that people found out. And then we expect her to tell the truth about what went on when she comes back out. That doesn't make any sense to me. She wanted it to be secret, so why is she going to reveal the secrets afterwards? It doesn't make any sense. But we just hate it. I know I hate it. Let's go on to another topic. Once again, trying to get some of this stuff off of the table. The Dem debate. Didn't watch it. Don't care. What makes the Dem debate so interesting to me? I really don't care about it, but just I have no idea what was said. I don't think it matters. The big issue, you have to contrast the Republican, what's going on the Republican side and what's going on the Democrat side. Despite what has all gone on, I think that Ted Cruz and Donald Trump really don't care for each other. I'm not so sure of that on the Democrat side. there is no part of me when I look at Donald Trump and Ted Cruz that Ted Cruz thinks, you know what? I really wish I could be Donald Trump. I don't think that goes through Ted Cruz's mind for 1 second. Likewise, with Donald Trump, I don't think he looks at Ted Cruz and says, I wish I could be Ted Cruz. I think that they are two totally different types of people, not just their political ideas, but their personalities and how they view the world outside of politics. Two totally different people. All right? Whereas when I look at the Democrats, when I look at Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, you know the feeling that I get? Just what I think I know about them. I think that there is a huge part of Bernie Sanders who wishes he was Hillary Clinton. Not that he wishes he was a woman. I'm not going to go that far. But when he knows how much money she is worth, and she's been Secretary of State, and she got to live in the White House, and all this money that she's raised, and the power that she's had, and the fame that she's had, and everything, I look at Bernie Sanders, and I see a guy who wishes he had that. Because at their core, socialists, if he's going to call himself that, are jealous human beings. That's what it's all about, getting other people's stuff. He does not look at Hillary Clinton and say, I don't want the American people to become that because I believe it's bad. He wants to have it because he's envious. Once again, in contrast to the Republican side, where I think that Ted Cruz looks at Donald Trump and says, I hope my kids don't grow up to be like him. And Donald Trump says, I'm glad my kids aren't like Donald Trump or aren't like Ted Cruz. I don't think that goes through Bernie Sanders' mind at all. If there is any disagreement between him and Hillary Clinton, it's just because he doesn't have the stature, the money, the wealth, the fame, and everything else of Hillary Clinton. Once again, that's who socialists are. At their core, it is not based on equality. It is based on envy. All right? On the other hand, I think Hillary Clinton's the same thing. Not that she wants to give up her money and everything, but I think that she looks at Bernie Sanders and she wishes she could be so open about being a crazy socialist. But because of her years of doing everything that she's done, what her husband has done, she's locked herself into a particular way that she has to act and what she has to say. So I think when you look at those two people on stage, both of them, they're two people who want to be the other. Hillary Clinton wants to be able to come out and say that she's a socialist and this and that and everything else, but she can't because those aren't who her supporters are. And really, she doesn't... She believes it in a way, but doesn't believe it in a way. She wants to have all her millions, but she wants to come out and just be one of the cool kids. And, you know, socialism's in now. That word is in anyway. But then Bernie Sanders, because he's a little bit of a truer believer, but he's not a real true believer. He talks a good game, but he looks at Hillary Clinton and sees her as somebody he envies. So it's the totally opposite dynamic. And that's why, at least from what I, once again, didn't see anything about what went on last night, but in the prior debates, that's why it seems like nothing ever goes on in the Democrat side. Whole bunch of stuff has gone on the Republican side, dishing, all sorts of ugliness. But on the Democrat side, yes, they have disagreements, but it almost feels like they're putting on a little bit of a show. It doesn't feel like the Republicans put on a show the last 6 months in these debates. It felt quite real. Democrats with Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, it feels like they're a little bit going through the motions simply because I think each one wants to be the other. One wants to be very open about her motives, whereas Bernie Sanders wants her wealth and everything, but just can't come out and say it. I want you to think about that. I don't know. Are there any more Democrat debates? I have no idea. I'm guessing there's no more Republican debates. That's all done now. Remember when we started back in August? Man, we got all these debates, and how are we ever going to get through all of them? And now they're over. And you know what? To me, it seems like the snap of the fingers. That's how quick it went. To me. Let's move on to something else before I leave you. Another weird dynamic, and I only have a couple minutes, but this Fox poll that came out, I think I know why this is going on, but here it is. Donald Trump in a national poll kicks Ted Cruz's and John Kasich's butt. However, when each of them is put up against Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump loses the most. Of course, it goes back to this idea that a lot of the support that Donald Trump is getting is from people who aren't really Republicans. Okay? Said that way long time ago, but we know there's too many conservatives who like him too. The danger in all of this, though, is that of the three men on the Republican side put up against Hillary Clinton, John Kasich does the best. That is very, very troublesome to me. And I hope that Ted Cruz is keeping, and his people are keeping, a very, very close eye on that. Now, I think the reason that this poll comes out this way is because John Kasich has pretty much gone through this entire primary season unscathed. Nobody takes him seriously. Has won one state, his own state. Has not been competitive anywhere else. Kind of a weird guy. Not that great a speaker. Has those weird hand motions. And I think that Ted Cruz and Donald Trump have been so concentrated on each other that John Kasich just gets to go off and do his own thing. I'm worried about this continuing. It doesn't keep me up at night, but how long and this isn't the first poll that has shown this regarding John Kasich. Because I know what happens. He looks at these polls and says, this is the reason I got to stand. Because if this gets to a contested convention, those polls could convert into delegates at the convention, and people could be so sick of Ted Cruz and Donald Trump that I can win. That better not happen. That better not happen. Because this will be, I think, am I supposed to believe these polls? Do I not believe them? Do I believe them? The reason that John Kasich does so well in these polls is because he hasn't been attacked. If Donald Trump or Ted Cruz spent 2 weeks on John Kasich's record, you'd see these polls change. It's just he looks so perfect because of all the attacks that have been done on Ted Cruz and Donald Trump between each other. But this is going to continue to give John Kasich hope. And I don't want John Kasich to be the nominee. I talked about him last week or the week before. I think he's a bad guy, and it's no surprise that he's not conservative. But I got to go. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. You can go to edwarddentzel.com where you can find all of my old Red State Talk Radio shows. You can also find those shows at SoundCloud, Podbean, Podomatic, and YouTube. You can go to edwarddentzel.com/book where you can download for free the first chapter of my next novel called The Comebacks. You can email me at edwarddentzel@reagan.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Dentzel Domain, all one word, no space in between. You can follow me on Facebook. You can friend me there. I don't do much with my public page, but my personal page, you can find me there. And if you're nice, I'll keep you around. And you can also find me on LinkedIn, although I haven't been there much recently. It's been a pleasure talking to you tonight. Hope you have a beautiful weekend. And you've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk.